Prof here, and I got a video for you that you might find interesting. It is about a laptop I got from a family member, and what we're doing to it. So here is said laptop. It showed up because cracked screen. I got this on a real nice sale, probably like a Black Friday sale or something, because it's an i7. Looking into it though, it's got a hard drive and Optane, and that's where this needs to change. So fix the screen. Oh yeah, the other thing is it is touchscreen, very unresponsive, but as you can see, it's not cracked anymore. I got the new screen there finally. Due to COVID, it actually my order got canceled once, and then took like 2 weeks to come in the second time, and that was even through Amazon and Prime. It seems to be either stuff comes quick or that happens. Like they lost my hammer too, and Amazon was out of the hammer I wanted and couldn't get it locally. I'm like, it's a freaking hammer, you know. Geez, I went into the wrong thing, I think. What I mean to do is go to safe mode. Either way, you'll see how long it takes to boot here now. So I got the new screen in, but being that it is an i7, it's a 7th gen, that's still supported. 6th gen and newer at this point is pretty much still okay. 4th, it has just basically gotten its last updates. 20H2 is probably the last version of Windows you're going to get that's going to properly support it. And even that's kind of iffy. But what we're doing here is, now that the screen's working, I made sure that that touch is working, everything like that. It also shipped with 8 gigs in single channel. So you can tell this is like a budget laptop. i7 to sell it. They put an Optane drive so it boots quick. And it's only the 16 gig Optane drive, not even the 32. So what's happening is, also it does have Intel, which is surprising for a budget, but it's their lowest end at the time. Am I blind here? 3165, because there'd be a 7165, and then above that there's the AX 200. That's what we're sticking in here. That'll give them Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5. I don't have that right now because I gotta borrow and steal it out of one of my laptops while it's on order. As you can see, we're still booting, and yes, it is still booting, but this is how slow it is because it has a slim hard drive in there. Optane is turned off now because I plan to image it. What we're going to is nothing special. It's just a drive I had around here. Any NVMe lower end will make this feel amazing compared to a hard drive. So this is just an Intel 600p, not a 660, which is what I would recommend nowadays. I just happen to have this one. 256, I believe. This was Squares' drive that somehow died. Then what we have here is another 8 gigs of the exact same RAM that's in here. So I don't have to like worry about pairing and stuff. I just type that exact same model into Amazon, and it was like 35 bucks. So we're going from 8 to 16 in dual channel. We're going to NVMe SSD. Right now it's a terabyte slim drive, which are known to fail, and 16 gig Optane. It was all right booting with the Optane enabled, but now see we're still going, guys. So I'm gonna clone that over to this, trying to preserve the recovery partition. And I think it's still in 1909. Before I do any work on the OS though, I want to make sure that the memory checks out. So we got our, this has got memtest on it, an OG. Look at how old that thing is. Sony 1 gig. You really don't need anything big for memtest. It's a couple hundred megabytes at most. And then we have Acronis. I find Acronis to be the best tool for imaging computers. Normally it's like 50 bucks. Watch for sales, especially Black Friday. You can get it for 20 bucks. It's well worth it. Make sure you download both available images. It'll have both a Windows one and a Linux one. My suggestion if you're dealing with Windows is start with Windows. Sometimes it'll say it can't lock the drive or the image. You can go back in and run check disk. In this case though, this system is so slow as it is. My suggestion, whip out the Linux one. Almost always it'll go through. Start with the Windows one though, because you generally a better experience, goes a bit faster, more hardware support, etc. But make sure you make both of them, because I can tell you if you just make one, you will need the other one. And there you go. We're finally at the login screen. Mind you, this is not even booted up. This is just at the login screen. That was probably a couple minutes. And this is why you don't use a slim drive and why they put Optane in, to make it somewhat reasonable. But what would be much better than Optane is just a SSD. Now, normally I would like to put a 500 gig in here, but this is already taking me far too long with all the delays of the screen, how long it took me to actually get to taking it apart, as well as get to actually putting it back together, because this is one of these cheap HPs where like the entire thing, like the bottom is the structure. Like, see, that doesn't flex all that much. Dang it. The bottom is the structure, but that entire thing has to come off if you want to work on anything on the insides. Then in this case, in order to do the because it is so cheap, it was not that hard to, like, once I get to the screen, it actually has screws that hold the screen in. See the four corners there? It was, however, adhered, but the bezel just pops off, and there's 4 screws. However, you can't do that without fully detaching the screen from the chassis. And it's already super weebly wobbly. And right now, as well, the bottom's there, so there's no bottom on this laptop. I'll show you in a second here. And yes, a lot of times I will run them like this until I know that they're working. There's that slim drive. Optane should be right there. So Optane, I have now at this point turned off Optane. And booted Windows once with it disabled. I have also then went in. I have when you're imaging, you got to disable secure boot generally if you're imaging on the system. Also, even if you do image it on another system, there's a decent chance that if you didn't disable secure boot first, that when you put the drive in that you imaged, it's not going to boot to it. You can always re-enable it later if you want. My suggestion, if it's a personal system and you're not all that worried about security, screw it, leave it disabled. Same thing with TPM. Now, if you want to use like your Microsoft account and all that nonsense, re-enable all that stuff. But from my experience, it's far, far better of an experience if you disable, go in the BIOS, clear the TPM, disable it. Same thing with secure boot, then boot into the Windows once. I'm going to boot into safe mode once just to make sure. And we're also going to make a video for a family member whose this is, just to show them how long it's taking to boot now. And then I'll do it once we're going to update Windows, update all the drivers, configure Windows with that 16 gigs of RAM, the NVMe, and show them, you know, the difference there, because it really will make a huge difference if you can tell how slow this is. Now, this 7th Gen i7 is not amazing. This is still back when, unless you had an HQ, and Hamlet has showed up because I'm talking. But unless you have an H or HQ or a Q, it's a dual core. So it's nothing stupendous or anything like that. But being a 7th gen is definitely new enough. And a lot of the computers I spec out nowadays for people, especially for like office work and stuff like that, is like it could be an i3, because you can now get 10th gen and 11th gen i3s or Ryzen 3s that are quad cores. Just a quad core processor, and then throw 16 gigs of RAM with it and a 512 gig SSD. That is going to do way. I know that's like Best Buy is going to want to advertise you the i7, and they're going to give you, in this case, a hard drive and 8 gigs of RAM. That's garbage. I'd rather have the i3, 16 gigs of RAM, and a 512 gig SSD. Now, say 256 instead, because like pricing or whatever. But I can tell you with the new lower end SSDs, like the equivalent of the 660p, but in like nowadays stuff, that's all a single chip. Because if you look at the 660p, it doesn't have a cache but it's still a controller. They're the SMI controller, and then those are the NAND chips. A lot of the cheap SSD nowadays would condense it all into basically something the size of that controller. Dell calls them their like 35. I don't know if it's speed 35, but they have like 35, 40. Is it 45 or 50? I don't remember. But the 35s are basically cashless single chip. Toshiba, or what was Toshiba is now Kioxia, makes those, and those are cheap. There's like, I know they charge more. Like the companies, like computer companies, will charge more generally for having an SSD, and they call that an SSD. But it's cheaper. Like literally, think about this. There's no way that something that big, essentially, like, even if it's on a big PCB, something that big with one NAND chip is more expensive than that hard drive right there. Like there's just more to that thing physically. So that's why nowadays you should be able to get a 512 gig low end SSD for the same price as a hard drive, like a 1 terabyte slim hard drive. That's gonna fail anyway because they all fail, and they're all super slow because they're 5400 RPM. But personally, I would take the higher performance 256. For your average person though, the low speed 512 is fine. So we're finally into safe mode. I'm just going to restart back in normal mode. And then, another thing. Here's another thing. You can either shut down Windows. There's like a correct way to shut down Windows. Or not a correct way, but by default, Windows, when you tell it to shut down, doesn't actually shut down. So, oh crap, it's not in here. I'll have to restart in normal Windows, which is going to take far too long. But there's a setting under the power buttons in control panel called fast startup. Disable that setting before cloning and restart the computer once. The reason why is if you do a shutdown with fast startup enabled, it actually goes into hibernation, not actually shut down. My recommendation, really, unless you're using it on a laptop that you regularly put into sleep or something like that, like on any desktop or something that you mainly use on and off, disable that. It's a feature that causes me so many headaches in troubleshooting PC repair. You're better off just disabling that. And what it's really there for is low-end systems resuming from a shutdown. And the reason is because it's faster to resume from a hibernation state than it is because you're just copying that hibernation file to RAM rather than actually having to boot the entire operating system. So for something like this with a slim hard drive, especially if it doesn't have Optane, because it's highly unlikely that with the 16 gigs in here. So that's where like caches a lot of times, like they put a 16 gig cache in here, whoa, whoop-de-doo. Or even a 32. Like if you ideally would want your page file, and then your Hibernate file, which includes your RAM and your page file, to fit on that. So if you were to resume it, would resume the entire thing from the cache. They never give you one big enough to do that. Hamlet, by the way, is super duper wanting attention. They never give you enough space in the cache to do that, actually. So it's like a cache in advertising name only, so they can say it has an SSD. Or sometimes even back in this era, Intel would actually market it as, because they remember it's called Optane memory. So you'd see a lot of places, and I'm glad they stopped doing this, but you'd see a lot of places market it as this would have 24 gigs of memory, and then it would put in quotes next to it 8 RAM, 16 Optane. They're basically fucking lying, because the type of Optane memory that this has isn't the type of Optane memory that you can actually use as memory, which only servers can have. And that was a whole big messed up marketing thing in the beginning. Oh yeah, by the way, remember how we rebooted from safe mode to normal mode? We're still going. That's why I said I'd show you that setting, but I don't think we're going to get there. Well, guys, this is the sort of upgrades. Like, if somebody in your family brings you a system, if it's for, like, or if I was working back when I was working at Geek Squad, or since you have it in here and it's a pain in the butt to take apart because the whole thing has to come apart to do anything. A stick of RAM is $35. You can get a 512 gig WD Black SSD, which is a good one, for $65 right now. Like, say the panel cost them, in this case, I think it was 80, then $95 on the second time I had to order it because it got canceled the first time. Get them to spend the $100 more and tell them, like, hey, this system is going to be way, way better and usable by doing that little bit of upgrades, and you'll be able to keep it longer. And I already have it apart, and it's a pain in the butt to take apart. So this isn't something that, say, if you ask me to do in 6 months, that I'm really going to necessarily want to do for you. Or if you're somebody who, like, whether you get paid because you're doing this as a job, like, that's going to cost the money, depending on how you get paid hourly or whatever it is. But keep that in mind. All right, well, hopefully this was useful to you, and we'll see you in the next one. Oops, almost forgot to show how fast this thing was since I've updated it. Here it is from a complete cold off and powering on. One loop, 2 loops, 3 loops, 4 loops, I think. And we're in. I'd say boot time wise, that's pretty darn good. I don't know, we're at 42 seconds on the video, and it's probably less than that. And here's Edge launching. There you go. It's up. Now let's relaunch it once it's loaded once. Much faster. Can do Chrome as well. I'd say that's pretty darn quick there. Let's run a speed test now. I do other things on the network that are doing stuff. But you still should probably be able to get a decent let's say 200 down. That was for the upload. That's actually kind of horrible. Oh, we are on Wi-Fi though. And other things are chewing up the entirety of the internet. Let's go to speedtest.net and see if we can get here. Because TestMy is actually better because it gets you an average, but if you want like full throughput, yeah, we're probably capped at Wi-Fi. I only have Wi-Fi 5 or AC because I have the Nest routers. So I don't have Wi-Fi 6. I'm waiting for some sort of access point like TP-Link or somebody to come up with a Wi-Fi 6A, and then I'll switch over to all that kinds of stuff. So not bad if you ask me. Pretty darn snappy. Let's go with a restart as well, just to satiate your palate. One, 2, 3. Only 3 on the restart. Plus 4 on the cold boot. All right. Yeah, I think that's a major improvement. Let me know what you guys think. And